tonight, the million mark.
We're in a very critical phase of our war against the coronavirus.
Over 1 million global cases of the coronavirus. And a roller coaster economy. Unemployment now smashing records. With businesses closed and stay-at-home orders across the country, the nation settles in for the long haul, with rapid testing on the way.
They can prevent droplets from coming out of our mouths.
And new guidelines for wearing masks to protect against the spread. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. America hunkering down. Welcome to Faith Nation, and thank you for joining us. I'm Jenna Browder. Tonight, 1 million people around the world have been infected with the coronavirus. This as the U.S. death toll tops 6,000, and Americans brace for what looks to be a long road ahead. CBN White House correspondent Ben Kennedy kicks off our coverage tonight with the latest. Ben?
Well, Jenna, right now there are more than 250,000 cases right here in the U.S., and early data does suggest that many of those infected have no signs or symptoms, which is why the CDC is looking to possibly recommend that if you're out and about, you must cover your face.
In the wake of the U.S. suffering a record one-day death toll Thursday, 38 states have issued some sort of stay-at-home order. But in Florida, the order exempts gatherings in places of worship. Also in Florida, Holland America cruise ship with coronavirus outbreaks on board has finally been allowed to dock. The pandemic is consuming precious supplies on the front line at an alarming rate. Medical personnel and first responders continue to lack essentials like respirators, masks, and swabs. New York's Governor Andrew Cuomo warns the state could run out of life-saving ventilators in less than a week.
If a person comes in and needs a ventilator and you don't have a ventilator, the person dies. That's the blunt equation here.
A ventilator made a big difference for this 44-year-old father of 3 who survived COVID-19.
When I woke up, the only thing I saw was bad news. It was 5,000 people got this and 5,000 people died. So I'm glad I was able to give some hope to other people that there's some good stories out there.
In order to have more happy endings like this, it could depend on people covering their faces in public. The CDC appears closer to releasing guidance for wearing cloth masks due to evidence that people without symptoms are spreading the virus.
It could be a scarf. It could be something you create yourself at home. It could be a bandana. We don't want you to use the kinds of masks that our first responders need, that our healthcare workers need.
Now, prevention and control measures do remain in Wuhan, where the virus outbreak did originate, and China did warn that a resurgence could happen in domestic infections. Jenna?
All right, Ben, thanks. Staggering unemployment numbers tonight. In just 2 weeks, 10 million Americans filed for unemployment, and many millions more may be out of work. Economists warn the coronavirus pandemic could lead the country into a severe recession. But some good news, relief for small businesses who take advantage of the Paycheck Protection Plan. CBN senior Washington correspondent Jennifer Wishon explains.
We're now beginning to feel the full effects of the pandemic, along with the economic stress of the lockdown measures needed to prevent it from spreading.
This is going to get worse before it gets better.
Jobless claims are already far worse than expected. Nearly 10 million Americans filed for unemployment in just 2 weeks. And those numbers may be low because states are overwhelmed with all of the new claims. So there may actually be many more people out of work.
Everything is now still marked pending. So I know everybody probably is experiencing the exact same frustrations.
And this is likely just the tip of the iceberg. Economists, Wall Street firms, and some Fed leaders expect unemployment to reach anywhere from 10 to 30%, along with a potentially severe recession. But help is on the way. As part of the $2.2 trillion stimulus bill, starting today, small businesses, which employ nearly half of the nation's workforce, can take advantage of the Paycheck Protection Act, nearly $350 billion in loans.
You get the money, you'll get it the same day. You use this to pay your workers. Please bring your workers back to work. If you've let them go, you have 8 weeks plus overhead.
These loans are up to 100% forgivable as long as employers keep paying their workers.
Lawmakers are now pushing for another $2 trillion relief bill, this time possibly focusing on an infrastructure package designed to put people back to work while upgrading the nation's road, broadband, and water systems.
But with the ink barely dry on the last $2 trillion deal, reaching agreement on another one so soon will be tough because of sharp differences between Democrats and Republicans. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News.
Thanks, Jennifer. And here now for more, our Faith Nation political panel, The Hill's Julia Manchester and CBN's chief political analyst, David Brody. Both of you, good to have you. Happy Friday. Let's talk about these economic numbers. You know, terrible to say the least. Julia, it's still an election year. Does this do anything to hurt the president's reelection?
Well, I would say it's really too early to tell. I think what will determine President Trump's reelection is how he deals with this economic crisis and how Democrats respond as well. You see in the Capitol, there is wrangling over the future of a phase 4 stimulus package. Nancy Pelosi really pushing for that. And you're also seeing Mitch McConnell, the Republican Senate Majority Leader, trying to put the brakes on that. You also see President Trump really pushing for a broader infrastructure. But even some Republicans are pushing back on that now. So I think when we start to talk about the election, we need to slow down a bit because we know that so much can change between now and then. But I think a lot of it depends ultimately on Republican and Democratic response to this crisis.
Yeah, David, your thoughts?
Well, I concur with Julia, period end. No, I have a little bit more to say, as you might imagine. But no, I think what's going to go on here is you got to be very careful with how the media reports this, because if you read a lot of these media headlines, especially if you get into the second, third, and fourth paragraph, they are starting to talk about how this is either bad for Trump or this is the worst economic news we've had since the Great Recession and all of that. Listen, you have to take it all with a grain of salt. We obviously know why these numbers are high, and so you have to be on spin control alert, and I think that's very important for folks out there. As for Donald Trump, I think we wait and see by Labor Day what these numbers are like, but a lot of that's going to obviously depend on the situation on the ground.
Yeah, Julia, we're starting to see partisan bickering. President Trump and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer have kind of tussled over who's more inept. So much for both sides really coming together. Is this going to get worse, do you think?
You know, I think it depends. I mean, recent history, I think, tells us it's going to get worse. And we know that President Trump already has quite a strained relationship with congressional Democrats. However, I will say that President Trump's relationship with some of the Democratic governors, you know, while it's not perfect, he does seem to have a better relationship with leaders like Gavin Newsom or New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, though we know they have sparred in the past. So, you know, I think it depends kind of what front you're looking on. But we know that President Trump and congressional Democrats don't have the best track record of working together. However, this is a very urgent situation, and we know that Republicans and Democrats realize they're both in an election year. So I think both sides could potentially say, look, it may benefit both of us to really push something through and try to compromise, but we know that compromise is already such a rare word in Washington.
So true. David, the Trump campaign has started a new effort called Catholics for Trump. How important is this? Just about 30 seconds left.
Very important, because the swing states of Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan are all crucial, and there are a lot of Catholics there, a lot of devout Catholics. Donald Trump won the Catholic vote, 52% over Clinton in 2016. Romney lost the Catholic vote to Obama. So the Catholic vote is crucial. And you can be sure that when Donald Trump says, I need the Christians, you know, I love the Christians, he's talking about not just evangelicals, but those Catholics too.
All right, David Brody, Julia Manchester, we have to leave it there. So good to see both of you. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Well, COVID-19 has exposed a number of things about the U.S. and China. One is how America depends on China for prescription drugs in a major way. What's been an underlying concern for a couple of decades now is now coming to the surface. CBN national security correspondent Eric Phillips has more.
Over the last 20 years, the U.S. has outsourced much of its drug manufacturing to China. Now, the lower cost made it seem like a good idea at the time, but now, in the middle of a pandemic, the U.S. could find itself at China's mercy.
This is very hidden from the American public. It took me 3 years to figure this out.
Author Rosemary Gibson wrote China RX 2 years ago. In it, she chronicled America's over-reliance on China for generic prescription drugs and pointed out a potential result of that dependence.
And that prediction was, in the event of a natural disaster or a global pandemic, if China shuts the door on exports, on sending us these important products, the United States could end up standing in line with other countries to get these core components for our medicines.
2 years later, COVID-19 is rocking the world, setting the stage for Gibson's warning to possibly come true.
We have production shutdowns in China because people were not going to work. Transportation routes and logistics have been disrupted.
Right now, we buy generic drugs from China for numerous conditions, including Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, diabetes, high blood pressure, HIV/AIDS, depression.
We can't make the generic antibiotics that mothers give to their children for ear infections, or that you take for bronchitis or pneumonia.
Gibson says that's because China controls the core chemicals to make them. She says China makes 10% of our generic drugs, and with that amount growing, they could soon name their price.
Our dependence will be total.
It's a problem so serious, Gibson recently testified, along with other experts, on Capitol Hill.
There's no question the coronavirus is causing a concern on our supply chain on drugs. That's a fact, and we need to be able to have domestic productions. That's a need.
A need that could lead to a solution.
We have to bring our ability to make our medicines back home. We have some tremendously talented, innovative people in this country, and they want to start making medicines in a quicker, faster, cheaper way.
Gibson pointed out, however, that companies will need government backing to get it done. Otherwise, China will undercut them.
What the medicine dependency of the United States on unreliable and probably dangerous Chinese suppliers represents is a microcosm of what the Chinese have been doing to us for decades.
Gibson says COVID-19 has provided a costly wake-up call that was necessary.
It's become real. It's not theoretical. This is real. And so this is a motivation for us to fix it.
The other issue is quality control. Gibson says some of the medicines from China have been found to either be contaminated or not contain any medicine at all results that do not bode well for the American consumer. Jenna.
Thank you, Eric. Churches struggling to stay afloat during this pandemic. Up next, a new initiative aimed at helping them and the former NFL player behind it. He joins us next on Faith Nation.
Come home to the sounds of Southern Gospel from CBN Radio. You'll enjoy a rich Southern blend of bluegrass, classic gospel, and Southern gospel favorites like the Gaithers, the Crab Family, and bluegrass sounds like Mountain Faith. So make yourself at home with the all-new CBN Southern Gospel. Now available at cbnradio.com.
Meet the pastors who are preaching the gospel in a fresh, fearless way. I'm Roberto Torres-Cedillo. Join me each week for Next Gen Voices. And watch God transform a generation.
Prophecy thousands of years old.
We were called to be a light to the world.
Being fulfilled today. Discover how. Get to life. Call 1-800-700-7000.
We consider it our duty to reach out and help others around the world.
For a gift of $10 or more, you can own the acclaimed CBN documentary To Life. Just call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to cbn.com.
To treat a human, no matter what he is, which religious he has, which color he is. This is what I'm doing.
See how the people of Israel are fulfilling prophecy.
History is being written, and I want to be a part of it.
By sharing their knowledge.
In Africa, in Asia, in South America, in East Europe.
And their love.
This is how we work. This is us.
Get to life. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to cbn.com.
Across the country, small churches in low-income areas are worried about staying afloat because of COVID-19. A recent study from the Barna Group reveals 47% of churches say church giving is significantly down, with 21% claiming they've had to reduce staff hours. To help churches keep their doors open, several Christian groups are teaming up to launch the Churches Helping Churches initiative. And joining us now for more is one of the men at the forefront of this issue, former NFL player Benjamin Watson. Benjamin, good to have you. Happy Friday. Thank you for being with us. First question, just tell us a little bit about some of the financial issues that some of these small churches are facing right now.
Well, thank you for having me. You mentioned a lot of it. You know, a lot of these churches, some of them smaller churches, are having to reduce hours for their workers, as many businesses are in the United States right now. This puts an undue strain on these organizations, seemingly because they obviously meet once a week, maybe twice a week. So you have that factored in also with the fact that, you know, we don't know how long it's going to be until regular church services will start happening on a weekly basis. So the idea behind this Churches Helping Churches Fund is just to encourage the body of Christ that in this time of crisis, we come to the aids of our brothers and sisters who may struggle through this.
Yeah, exactly what will this initiative do to help, and who will receive these funds?
Definitely. So basically, as you mentioned before, there's a number of pastors who are worried. My father's a pastor, and he's expressed the same concerns, not only about his congregation, but about other congregations that he's been in contact with. So we have a process of vetting. These are going to be 501c3 churches who are vetted through this process. National Christian Foundation is actually where the fund will be kept. So as you know, that's another added layer of just checking to make sure that the financials are where they need to be when it comes to these churches. There's really no criteria as far as what area of the country, but they are going to be churches between 50 and about 150 members who are going to be eligible for these funds. There'll be $3,000 grants that will be made to them. And this hopefully will go on as long as need be. Our goal is to start off with a fund of about $500,000. Right now, we're at about $150,000. So our hope is that churches that have larger memberships, or maybe individuals who are like-minded that have a bit of expendable income that they would like to use to donate to the fund, will do so, especially right now during this time. Matthew 25 talks about helping the least of these. And when Jesus said that, he was talking about brothers and sisters in Christ who are going through a struggle. Right now, as you know, we're in that struggle.
Yeah. Benjamin, you've also teamed up with some other athletes to encourage them to draw closer to God in a time like this. What's been the response to that?
You're talking about the FCA, Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and Pro Athlete Outreach huddles that we're doing virtually on a weekly basis. So these huddles are kind of, our virtual encouragement for those who want to tune in and watch. It's geared towards athletes, high school, college, even professional athletes and their parents and coaches who are used to having that sort of camaraderie, but because of the social distancing, we're not able to do that right now. So people can see that on FCA video on YouTube on a weekly basis on Wednesdays. And it's just me and 2 or 3 other pro athletes talking about how we're training during these times, talking about the struggles that we may be having on a personal basis, and then also just giving a word of encouragement to believers and non-believers alike, that God is sovereign. He knows what's going on, even in the midst of our struggle.
Yeah, just a few seconds left here, but final question. What's your message, Benjamin, to the body of Christ right now? Many Christians worried, feeling very, very scared right now with this coronavirus.
Well, my message is, look, God knows what's going on. This doesn't surprise him, although it's uncomfortable for us. He never promised that we will be comfortable in our lives. As a matter of fact, when you look around the world, there are greater atrocities happening than what's happening right here in the United States right now. We need to have a biblical, but also a global perspective. That doesn't mean that this isn't uncomfortable, but it also means that through it all, he is beside us. He's the one that gives us peace. He's the one that gives us encouragement. And just like this Churches Helping Her Churches Fund, it's our job to exude that and give that to other people, while also being honest that, hey, even as believers, we're in the world and we're going to struggle. But the promise is that God will never leave us. And again, this doesn't catch him by surprise. He will see us through.
It's a good word. Benjamin Watson with Churches Helping Churches. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Too often, we carry baggage from our past. You know what it's like. It affects everything and everyone in our lives. It's always there, weighing us down and keeping us from achieving true happiness. But do you know God never meant for us to be trapped in the past? You can be free of your baggage. Learn how God's forgiveness leads to changed lives and new beginnings. Call the 700 Club.
I'm Ephraim Graham, and this is Studio 5. Cruise with me as I discover the good things happening in the world of music, sports, television, and movies.
The fact that Ryan Coogler was going to be directing the film, I knew that something special was going to happen.
We'll chat with artists at the forefront of entertainment and explore the connection between popular culture and faith.
I asked my pastor, I said, well, does that mean I'm supposed to be a preacher? He says, well, no, you already have a pulpit.
Watch Studio 5, Wednesday night at 9:30.
Tikkun Olam.
This is our nature as a country.
To make the world a better place.
Literally, we felt the earth shaking.
The Christian Broadcasting Network presents To Life, how Israeli volunteers are changing the world.
This film needs to be seen by everyone.
I was in tears. Now you can own the inspiring documentary To Life on DVD.
There is blood on our hands if we know and we walk away.
I'm so grateful that this film was made.
To Life can be yours for a gift of $10 or more. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to CBN.com.
We know that every minute counts to save life.
It'll bless Israel, but it'll also bless all the friends of Israel.
Discover the untold story of how Israeli volunteers are making the world a better place. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to CBN.com to get your copy today.
Welcome back. Well, most white evangelicals are satisfied with the president's initial response to the coronavirus outbreak. That's according to a new study by the Pew Research Center. Around 3/4 of white evangelicals say they are at least somewhat confident the president is doing a good job of responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. The support for the president comes in the wake of another Pew study revealing most Americans don't see Trump as religious, and fewer than half say they think he's Christian. And here with us now is Greg Smith, Associate Director of Research at the Pew Research Center. Greg, thanks for joining us. Happy Friday.
Thank you for having me.
So the president is getting mixed reviews on how he's handling the coronavirus crisis, but that number is much different among white evangelicals. What are you seeing?
Well, you know, white evangelical Protestants have long been among the president's strongest supporters, and we see that to this day in their evaluations of the way that he's handling the outbreak. Something like 3/4 of white evangelical Christians told us in the middle of March that they had confidence that the president could handle the job with respect to the outbreak. And even more recently, we find that about 8 in 10 white evangelicals say they think he's doing an excellent or a good job in the way he's reacting to the crisis.
Oh, and what's your polling showing when it comes to evangelicals and all faiths in terms of how seriously they're taking this coronavirus crisis?
Well, we do see widespread concern and worry among the public. We know that something like 9 in 10 white evangelical Christians say that the outbreak, that the crisis poses a major threat to the U.S. economy. That's very similar to what we see among other religious groups. We also see that about half of white evangelical Christians say they think the outbreak poses a major threat to the health of the U.S. population as a whole.
And what about Republicans and Democrats? Is there a difference, Greg, in how they see this whole situation?
There certainly are big differences between Republicans and Democrats in terms of the way they evaluate the president. Republicans, not surprisingly, are much more positive in their evaluations of the way the president has handled the crisis. We also see that Republicans are a bit more likely than Democrats to say they've turned to prayer as a way of coping with the crisis. And that reflects divisions, differences in the baseline religiousness of the two parties.
Another very interesting study by Pew, when it comes to the president's faith, you found some very interesting results. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it's very interesting. Most Americans do not think that Donald Trump is a particularly religious person. Most people say they think he is not too or not at all religious. And when we ask people if they know what the president's religion is, what faith does he identify with, about half of people say either that they're not sure, they don't know, or they say that they don't think he identifies with any particular religion.
Since he took office, is there any indication or data to suggest he slipped in support among evangelicals, or are those numbers relatively consistent?
The support for the president among white evangelical Protestants has been remarkably consistent. For example, we know that in the 2016 election, 8 in 10 white evangelical voters backed Donald Trump over Hillary Clinton. In our most recent polling from just a couple of weeks ago, 8 in 10 white evangelical Protestants say they think Donald Trump is doing an excellent or a good job responding to the outbreak. So the support for the president among white evangelical voters has been remarkably consistent.
Greg Smith with the Pew Research Center, thank you so much. We appreciate all of the work you all do there. It's wonderful.
That's very kind of you. Thank you for having me.
Have a good weekend. Still ahead, kids, cats, and cans of Lysol joining the CBN workforce. Behind the scenes with our news team colleagues working from home.
It's the new Superbook Bible app. It's packed with games, activities, and Superbook episodes that you can watch for free. Oh no! There's trivia, a fun daily devotional, and answers to your Bible questions. Plus, an easy-to-understand Bible the whole family will enjoy. You can even create your own Superbook character. Ta-da! It's the new Superbook Bible app. Free downloads on iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon.
From Washington, D.C., uncompromising stories, interviews, and analysis from veteran journalists David Brody.
Escalating fight.
Jenna Browder.
Chose his words carefully.
Ben Kennedy.
Plan to join him.
And Amber Strong.
For impeachment grows a little bit louder.
Bringing you the political news that matters.
We get out and tell the story of the progress that we're making in this country.
Watch Faith Nation, weeknights at 6 on the CBN News Channel.
We will move the American embassy to the eternal capital of the Jewish people, Jerusalem.
As the nations rage, you can stand with Israel.
History is being written, and I want to be a part of it.
Call 1-800-700-7000 and get to life.
This is our nature as a country.
Discover the untold story of how Israeli volunteers are changing the world.
We consider it our duty to reach out and help others around the world.
For a gift of $10 or more, you can own the acclaimed CBN documentary To Life.
To treat a human, no matter what he is, which religious he have, which color he is, this is what I'm doing.
Support Israel in their time of need. Get to Life, now available on DVD. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to cbn.com.
And I wish that other people throughout the world could see this side of Israel.
Finally tonight, working from home has taken on a whole new meaning for many Americans, and that is certainly true for us here at CBN News. For those of us who are still coming into the studio, we took this photo earlier today, holding down the fort and, of course, practicing social distancing. And for our coworkers working from home, it's definitely a balancing act. Scripts, rundowns, kids, pets, and the rest. Some fully dressed up, others getting comfy in sweats and slippers. Either way, work does look a little different for most of us right now, and probably for you too. And no matter what boat you are in, the CBN News team will be here to bring you the good news and, of course, work through the bad together. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great week, and we'll see you back on Monday.